Most people believe that financial ruin is a sudden storm, a sudden crash, a sudden loss. We think of bankruptcy as a thief that breaks into the house in the middle of the night. But the Bible does not call it sudden. The Bible calls it a slow walk into the wrong valley. It is a quiet series of tiny compromises, entirely driven by what the eyes can see. Consider a modern investor. He looks at a high return on his desk and ignores the hidden risks. The math looks perfect. The chart goes up. His eyes tell him it is a guaranteed victory. Or consider a young father. He moves his entire family across the country for a larger paycheck. He sees the higher salary. He does not see the toxic culture that will slowly destroy his peace. We are all wired to choose what looks best right now. We want the greenest pasture. We want the highest yield. We want the fastest path to comfort and security. But visual perfection is often a trap. What looks mathematically correct can be spiritually bankrupt. This is not a new problem. This is a very ancient human flaw. 4,000 years ago, a man made a mathematically perfect decision about his future. He looked out over a valley, saw that it was rich and fertile, and chose it for himself. That man was Lot, and that single choice eventually cost him absolutely everything he owned. Listen closely to the ancient text in Genesis chapter 13, verses 10 and 11. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain. And Lot set out toward the east. The two men parted company. This seems like a simple land dispute. Most readers think Lot was just being slightly selfish, grabbing the best real estate for his own herds. But if you read the ancient text carefully, this is not a story about land. It is a warning. Notice the specific sequence of his actions. The text points it out. Lot looked around and saw. His entire life trajectory was decided by a visual metric. He used his eyes to judge his future. He evaluated his destiny using only the raw data his physical eyes could process in that exact moment. He saw abundant water. He saw green pastures. He saw what looked like a guaranteed return on investment. This is the foundational error in how we manage wealth today. We are trained to only measure the visible. We measure the starting salary. We measure the interest rate. We measure the square footage of the property. But a visual metric completely blinds us to the invisible costs attached to that new wealth. It blinds us to the spiritual ecosystem, the relational damage, and the hidden compromises required to stay there. When you build your financial life purely on what looks best, you are walking in the footsteps of Lot. Before we follow Lot any further into the valley, we must establish 3 strict boundaries for this conversation. First, this is not a prosperity video promising you sudden wealth if you just have enough faith. Second, this is not specific financial advice telling you exactly which assets to buy or sell today. And third, this is absolutely not a message condemning wealth. The Bible does not hate financial success. Abraham was an incredibly wealthy man. The issue is never the wealth itself. The issue is the compass. The problem is what you are willing to trade, ignore, or compromise in order to acquire that wealth. Which brings us to a painful modern question. Why do highly intelligent people make destructive financial choices? Because we are trained by society to optimize the numbers, while entirely ignoring the spiritual and relational environment. The modern investor looks at a high-yield contract and sees only the guaranteed profit margin on the paper. He completely ignores the ethical rot of the business partners he is legally binding himself to. The young father accepts a massive promotion that requires uprooting his entire family to a new, isolated city. He sees the larger paycheck, but he fails to measure the devastating cost of losing his supportive community. On paper, in a ledger, or on a spreadsheet, the mathematical calculation looks completely flawless and perfectly logical. But a ledger cannot measure the slow, quiet destruction of a man's peace, his character, or his family. Proverbs chapter 14 verse 12 warns us perfectly about this exact optical illusion. Let us listen to it. There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Notice the word appears. The spreadsheet approves it. The culture applauds it. It looks mathematically flawless. But it is a perfectly paved road that leads directly off a cliff into total spiritual bankruptcy. We are masters at justifying dangerous financial choices as long as the immediate payout is high enough. So before we judge Lot, I must ask you 4 diagnostic questions to test your own trajectory. First, are you a skilled builder accepting contracts from corrupt clients, trading your integrity for a premium fee? Second, are you a professional staying in a deeply toxic work environment simply because the salary is comfortable? Third, are you partnering with unethical people because the guaranteed financial return is simply too good to ignore? And fourth, are you sacrificing your family's peace just to move into a more prestigious, wealthy neighborhood? If you answered yes to any of these, you are actively engaging in the silent compromise. You trade a fraction of your peace for a fraction of wealth, and you do it again tomorrow. Proverbs chapter 28, verse 22 warns, "A greedy man hastens after wealth and does not know that poverty awaits him. He is in such a frantic rush for the visible reward that he completely abandons his invisible protection." No one wakes up and decides to destroy their legacy. It happens one small, logical choice at a time. This is the modern mistake. Now, let us examine the 6 exact steps of Lot's descent into the valley. The first step in his slow descent was relying entirely on the illusion of the eyes. The ancient text says Lot looked around and saw that the plain was well watered. He used a purely visual and mathematical metric to evaluate a deeply spiritual and generational decision. We repeat this exact same error today whenever we judge an opportunity purely by its surface. A real estate developer sees a highly profitable plot of land in a deeply corrupt district. He calculates the financial margin, but he completely ignores the cost of working with dishonest officials. A software engineer accepts a massive salary at a company known for burning out its employees. The paycheck looks mathematically perfect, but the hidden tax is his marriage and his physical health. It is like drinking from a magnificent golden cup that is filled with toxic, bitter water. But I want to offer a warning here. The eyes themselves are not inherently evil. God gave us intellect and vision to evaluate good opportunities. Mathematical calculation is not a sin. The trap snaps shut only when the visual data becomes the absolute only metric you use. So you must train yourself to look beyond the spreadsheet. Do not let numbers lead you. You must forcefully measure the relational and spiritual cost before you ever count the financial profit. Because what looks like the garden of the Lord might actually be the road to ruin. The second step in his slow descent was not a geographic move, it was a relational severance. The text notes that Lot set out toward the east, and the 2 men parted company. In his rush to secure the fertile plain, Lot completely separated himself from Abraham's wise counsel. He traded the invaluable protection of an experienced mentor for the immediate gratification of a solo venture. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 20 tells us, "He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." Wisdom is naturally transferred through physical and relational proximity. Think of a talented junior doctor. She leaves a highly disciplined but demanding mentor at a hospital. She opens a private clinic with investors who care only about billing, rapidly losing her ethical anchor. Or consider a young architect who abandons a seasoned firm to chase lucrative fast cash development gigs. Without the firm's strict oversight, he begins cutting corners, and his foundational skills slowly erode into nothing. They view separation from seasoned wisdom as independence, but walking away from a lighthouse leaves you blind. But I want to offer a warning here. Wise counsel will almost always slow down your financial growth. A true mentor will tell you to wait. They will point out the invisible costs you are ignoring. You must deliberately keep yourself tethered to people who care more about your character than your income. Never sever a relationship with a wise counselor just because they advise against a highly profitable move. The third step in his slow descent was moving his tent closer to the epicenter of compromise. Genesis chapter 13 verse 12 tells us that Lot pitched his tents near the city of Sodom. He did not move directly into the wicked city. He merely positioned his family in its wealthy suburbs. He wanted the immense economic benefits of the corrupt system without officially participating in its moral collapse. We play this exact same dangerous game today. We believe we can stand near the fire without burning. It is like a man building a wooden house right beside a volcano, trusting the wind will not shift. Consider a brilliant accountant. He accepts a lucrative position at a firm known for deeply questionable tax practices. He tells himself he will only handle the legitimate clients, keeping his own hands and reputation completely clean. Or consider a local contractor who takes jobs from a massive developer known for ruthlessly exploiting vulnerable laborers. He justifies the profitable contract by claiming he is only responsible for his own crew, ignoring the abuse. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, offers a blunt warning. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. You simply cannot maintain your spiritual and moral integrity if your primary financial income relies on a corrupt ecosystem. The dark ink of compromise does not respect your personal boundaries. Once you step in it, it spreads. But I want to offer a warning here. Geographic and financial proximity will eventually erode your internal convictions. Therefore, audit the source of your wealth. If your income requires proximity to darkness, move your tent immediately. The fourth step in his descent was the quiet, invisible normalization of his surroundings. Genesis chapter 14 verse 12 drops a devastating historical detail about Lot's exact location. It notes that when invaders attacked, they captured Lot because he was living in Sodom. He was no longer just pitching his tent on the border, he had moved completely inside. When you stay near a corrupt system long enough, your baseline for normal begins to shift. What absolutely shocked your conscience on day 1 becomes completely acceptable routine by year 3. The human mind is incredibly adaptable. It will quickly adjust to survive in toxic environments. But in order to adapt to the dark, your eyes must slowly lose their sensitivity to light. We see this constant, quiet erosion in modern business and professional life every single day. A business owner starts by quietly padding a few small expenses to match industry norms. Within a few years, he is actively defrauding his clients without feeling a single ounce of guilt. A professional accepts a hostile, cutthroat corporate culture just to secure a higher bonus. And soon, he finds himself speaking to his own spouse and children with the same ruthless aggression. But I want to offer a warning here. Spiritual and moral erosion never announces its arrival. You must aggressively defend your ethical baseline. Do not let a broken environment set your temperature. The fifth step in his descent was far more dangerous than simply living in the city. He did not just survive in the darkness, he actively pursued status and authority within it. Genesis chapter 19 verse 1 reveals the terrifying truth. Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. In the ancient world, the city gate was the absolute center of civic power, business, and judgment. Lot had successfully become a respected elder and a recognized leader in a completely depraved economic system. This is the illusion of prestige. It is like proudly climbing to the highest rung of a wooden ladder, while remaining completely blind to the fact that the wall it leans against is actively collapsing. Consider a corporate executive. He climbs the ranks of a company he knows is fundamentally unethical. He accepts the shiny awards and the title, trading his moral compass for empty industry recognition. Or think of a talented consultant who builds the entire strategic framework for a highly exploitative industry. She is celebrated as a genius by her peers, but her success is entirely tethered to a doomed market. But I want to offer a serious warning here. Achieving status in a broken system is a trap. Prestige and public recognition make it infinitely harder to walk away when the collapse finally begins. The title you fought so hard to win becomes the exact weight that prevents you from escaping. Do not seek the crown of a collapsing kingdom. Refuse any title that binds you to a corrupt foundation. The sixth and final step in this progression is the inevitable consequence of the first 5. It is the ultimate loss, the terrifying moment when the visual illusion completely shatters and reality hits. Genesis chapter 19, verses 15 and 16. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Flee for your lives." He was forced to leave behind absolutely everything he had built. The mathematically perfect decision ended with him running into the desert completely and entirely empty-handed. What took him decades of silent compromise to build was destroyed in a single morning. He saved his physical life, but his generational legacy and his financial empire were completely erased. It is the tragic realization that wealth built on compromise has absolutely no structural roots. When the storm finally arrives, it forcefully sweeps away everything that is not built on truth. Consider a wealthy entrepreneur who trades his health for decades of relentless, highly profitable expansion. He ends up spending his entire fortune just trying to buy back a few more years of life. Or consider a highly paid lawyer who ruthlessly neglects his spouse and his children to finally make partner. He reaches the pinnacle of his career, only to live completely alone in a massive, silent mansion. But I want to offer a warning here. Do not mistake temporary accumulation for lasting blessing. If your wealth requires you to continuously sacrifice your soul, your health, or your family, walk away entirely. We have seen the total tragedy of the visual metric. But what exactly is the biblical alternative? Genesis chapter 13 verses 8 and 9. Abraham says to his nephew, "Let there be no strife. If you go to the left, I will go to the right." Abraham deliberately surrendered the advantage. He willingly took the lesser financial option in order to absolutely guarantee the preservation of their relationship. Abraham understood a principle that modern financial advice completely ignores: the immense, incalculable wealth of living peacefully. He knew that the highest mathematical return on your investment is utterly useless if it requires a war. He deliberately chose to optimize his spiritual and relational environment rather than simply optimizing his maximum income. The wise person actively builds a margin of safety. They intentionally leave some money on the table, in exchange for a fortified relational foundation that can easily withstand the inevitable storms of life. Consider a modern business owner who looks at a contract and completely rejects a highly profitable deal. She walks away because the client is notoriously abusive, and she refuses to bring that toxicity into her company. Or think of a father who turns down a massive executive promotion in a distant, isolated city. He chooses a smaller salary to keep his children rooted in a deeply supportive, faith-filled community environment. This deliberate choice is not financial weakness. It is actually the ultimate, most resilient long-term financial strategy. The world brutally calls this leaving money on the table. The Bible simply calls it guarding your heart. When you build this margin, you are actively rejecting the modern culture of endless, reckless maximization. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 1 states, "Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife." This is the exact mathematical equation Abraham used. Imagine two merchant ships. The greedy captain fills his cargo hold to the absolute maximum edge. When a sudden storm hits, the overloaded ship sinks, while the ship with empty margin survives. The empty space inside the hull is exactly what keeps the vessel safely afloat. In modern terms, building a margin means you intentionally operate below your maximum financial capacity. Consider a skilled freelance designer. He deliberately takes on only 3 clients instead of 5. He sacrifices a portion of his potential income to ensure he has time for his family. Or think of a married couple. The bank approves them for a massive luxury mortgage, but they intentionally choose a modest house, keeping their monthly debt far below their approved limit. They are building a financial fortress, because a deliberate margin absorbs the violent shocks of life. When the economy shifts or the market drops, the person with margin does not panic. But I want to offer a warning here. The culture will call you foolish for doing this. Do not listen. Protect your peace fiercely, because it is an asset money can never buy back. We have traced the exact progression of a mathematically perfect but spiritually bankrupt financial decision. The arrogant person always asks, "What is the absolute highest possible return I can get right now?" But the wise person asks, "What will this wealth require me to sacrifice, and who will I become?" These two questions represent two entirely different paths. One leads to lasting peace, the other to the valley. Abraham chose peace over the most profitable land, willingly surrendering his immediate visual advantage. In doing so, he secured a generational legacy and a stable fortune that outlasted entire ancient empires. Lot chose exactly what his physical eyes desired, optimizing his short-term financial position with absolute mathematical perfection. But because he ignored the toxic environment, he eventually walked into the barren desert with absolutely nothing. You cannot separate your financial decisions from your spiritual life. They are intimately and eternally connected. If you want to build wealth that actually endures through generations, do not let your eyes lead you. You must learn to navigate your daily decisions by the timeless, invisible compass of biblical wisdom. If you found value in this teaching, please subscribe to our channel for more ancient principles on wealth. Until next time, choose your environment very carefully and guard your internal peace above all else. May you build a legacy that lasts. This video is a reflection on biblical principles for general encouragement only. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice, and it does not promise any financial outcome. Please consult a licensed professional for your own situation and study the scriptures for yourself.